Need for Speed Unbound has recently had its 2-year anniversary. Well, not very recently because it was back in November, but here we are talking about the game in December. So I mean, oh well, right? Y'all know I had to cover a bunch of stuff, and we also had to cover people complaining about having PvP in a PvP game mode. That was very, very important, of course. Anyway, today's video is about Need for Speed Unbound and the fact this game had one of the greatest comebacks I've ever seen in a video game. It may be top 5 best all time, next to Cyberpunk and Battlefield 2042. Think about any theme park you want, and then think about the biggest roller coaster available there. You know how it goes up and down over and over again? This is exactly what Unbound did for the Need for Speed community. This game had people hooked like nothing I've ever seen before when it first dropped. For everyone who was not here at the beginning, let me tell you, people were playing this game at all hours of the day. There was no way people were going to work or school because I would hop on and play for a bit, get off, and go to bed, and a full 24 hours later, those same people would still be playing. There were so many things that were new to the player base, the animations, the micro drifting mechanic, the infamous burst NOS that people to this day still think is cheating, which is hilarious by the way. For all my manual players, we even had the OP manual launch where you could shift gears before the race even started. Unbound was really doing things that were unheard of, and apparently this game was going to get the support that was supposed to get heat too. Everything looked up and bright and green. And then we started to realize what we were actually looking at. A game you couldn't start races by yourself in. A game that made you spend 12 straight hours grinding in order to get enough money to get the Regera. And hold up, before we keep going, let me tell all you new cats something who are complaining about how y'all still don't have any money somehow. That shouldn't even be remotely possible with all the stuff y'all can do now. Lockdown can literally make you millions of dollars in 30 minutes. It took us the better half of 24 hours to get that same amount of money. Y'all got it so good now, it's ridiculous. You got boosted playlist, PvP with a guaranteed max player count in the races. I mean, unless it's BRS Plus, because it'll suck. Y'all even got link ups, which people love to make fun of, but I mean, let's be real here. Everyone has had fun in a link up at least once, and if you haven't, stop trying to be different. Have fun. In today's video, we're going over the first 4 volumes of the game's release and the up and down cycle it continued to stay in until the recent releases of new volumes where it steadily climbed up. This is just a bit of a walk down memory lane, picking fun here and there and not really diving too deep into one specific thing. Because this is only talking about the first 4 volumes, there will be a part 2 dropping most likely tomorrow, if not the next day. That will cover volume 5 all the way up until the newest volume 9, so stay tuned. If you enjoy, make sure to go ahead and drop a like and subscribe, and let's get into the video. Before I went on my little rant about money, the point is there were a lot of things wrong with the game. Heck, the game didn't even come with cops on release. Yes, I said that correctly. There were no cops in multiplayer, which is insane because there were literally cops in single player. There was no nighttime mode. There was quite literally only races to do. People complained and complained, including myself, and for a minute, we thought there would be no updates and the game was just gonna die, just like Heat. However, here they come with Volume 2, the first of many post-launch updates for Unbound. With that update came new things to do, like hot laps, which at the time were decent, a cool way to kind of do a time trial without the actual time trial race. Another thing that came out with the volume were the challenges that updated every single day. Now, I know that at this point in the game, the challenges have become the bane of our very existence due to them freezing the game when you complete one, but back then they were great and gave the community something to do. And finally, they added cops. No, they did not add the hot pursuit type of stuff people were looking for, but they were there. And that is what truly mattered to a lot of people. These cops are 100% not the ones we experienced in Lockdown or even Hot Pursuit. These were Volume 2 cops, which were a whole different type of terrible. But hey, they were there. Of course, you had the little EA play rewards and different styled cars that were added as well, but the big things people complained about seem to be taken care of, at least for now. This is what I would consider the first roller coaster up and down. Then we step into the dark ages where Volume 3 releases and it has people either very upset or super upset. Why? We will get to that. Previous to this update, people were starting to get bored again, which was to be expected. Hot laps, while fun for the 0.5 seconds you spend doing them, were not evergreen types of content. Once you did them, that was it, literally. The cops, as said before, were beyond dumb. The Heat 5 level was supposed to mean something. It did back then in Heat when cops were on crack and ready to crash out over a low tier Civic, but now they were nothing more than marshmallows with red and blue lights stapled to the top of them. Volume 3 introduced the Speed Pass, which people did not like. However, this was before the paid Speed Pass, which was dropped. Huge difference. Now this speed pass, I gotta give them credit. It helped keep the community engaged for the 75 tiers it had, but the thing about it was, there wasn't really anything good worth grinding for. It was one of those things that Criterion did correct, but not really at the same time. If you want your community to be engaged with stuff like this, it needs to have new cars in it and things we would actually want to get, right? Granted, this was the first ever speed pass, so they might have been testing the waters, but it was still needed a little bit. Speaking of new cars, this was when they added the DeLorean, a car that actually caught the attention of the community due to its iconic nature and how they thought it would perform among supercars and tuners. Now, this was not the first car they added post-launch. The Mercedes Maybach had been added in Volume 2, but it was not mentioned for a reason. Nobody asked for it. It didn't even belong in the game, and you could say the DeLorean didn't either, but at least it's closer to racing than a 15,000 pound limo is. I will say that they did bring the DeLorean in pretty well with players having to complete 12 link-ups, which was a new game mode added, but more on that later, to unlock the car. But the one thing I still wish they had did for this car is at least created a theme around it. They have the Easter egg where if you hover at the 88 mile per hour, the fire comes from the tires, but what about everything else? What about the different body kits from the other movies? What about having a themed playlist? What about building up hype for the car before just dropping it out of nowhere? This has long passed though, so we will move on from that. Link-ups apparently were a hit or miss for everyone. I personally enjoyed the mindless fun and people constantly crashing into each other, but I can understand that people wanted a real structured game mode as well. It was yet another good thing that was added post-launch. However, I will always rank these higher than hot laps due to the fact they are evergreen content, meaning you could keep doing them and getting rewards that are still worth your effort and time. Once you completed 12 link-ups, you got the DeLorean, but you could still keep going and getting more money. Back then, it was the best way of getting cash if I'm not mistaken. The other mode that was added would have been the solution if it were executed a bit better. That other mode is of course the drift playlist. What a great idea to have in a racing game like Need for Speed, and I'm not being sarcastic. I think it was a great move and it worked on paper, except that's it. It only worked on paper. The drifting in Unbound was the worst thing I've ever had to experience, and if you played Takeover in single player, you knew exactly how bad it was. The handling was terrible, and you couldn't even hold a real angle. So once again, Criterion and Unbound fell into the up and down roller coaster trap. Volume 4 brought out the extreme bias Need for Speed had for Porsche in making their cars top tier in some way for the past few games. This volume was focused on 75 years of Porsche and introduced an electric car which had the community divided yet again. Half the community just wanted a new car and was excited to get their hands on the Porsche. The other half either didn't like the Porsche or didn't like the fact it was electric. To be honest, understandable. Personally, I was never a really big fan of the car and only used it for a little while, so my time spent driving it and racing it is extremely low. This was yet another time where Unbound would have the player do something with the new event or activity to unlock a car. And as I said before, I love that. It encourages players to step out of their comfort zone and actually play the things that they have been asking for, such as new races and content in general. You had to play the new Porsche playlist 3 times and I enjoyed every minute of it. Sure, some of the tracks were not the best, but it was something to do, which really didn't come too often besides a couple new races, or them switching playlists around an already created playlist. The Speed Pass was back, and once again it had 75 ranks, and no, this was still not the premium one. Back then the game was strictly about the content, not the money. We won't get into that until later though. We had a legendary custom Carrera S, which looked okay in my opinion, but overall the contents of the Speed Pass were still less than ideal. There wasn't really anything that still hooked players into grinding. But now we're really starting to get into the real bread and butter, and I will say that this volume really brought people who had left back to the game for the first time. This was the update that changed the entire stale dynamic of Unbound and gave the community a piece of what it had been asking for and deserving from release, and that was Gauntlet races. Gauntlet races for all the new people are the races with cops, and the community loved it. I remember when it first dropped, I was on it grinding for a solid 7 hours straight live on stream. Now, the cops were still a bit weird at times and it still wasn't really a challenge, but the opportunity to race while cops were chasing you is the beginning of the hot pursuit feeling people wanted back in the Need for Speed games. More importantly, Unbound, because remember, Heat had cops in races, and they got intense very fast. This also introduced the first instance of a real risk and reward system, because if you got crashed out or busted by the cops, you were left with nothing. This made it even better with higher stakes to make it to the end, and had players feeling great about Gauntlet. The last major thing this volume brought was another great way to make money, and that was the boosted playlist. So now on top of link ups, we had boosted playlists and boosted link ups. Money was easier than ever to get, and this is when you started to see some people with millions of dollars in their bank accounts on Reddit and other platforms. On top of this, you got more XP and it helped through the speed pass, so everything seemed to be working together. It looked like Unbound was finally on the up and up again after a slump and debatably bad previous updates. But before we get into Volume 5, we're going to go ahead and wrap this video up, unfortunately. I do want to say to y'all, hey, stay with me, it won't be too long. The next part will be dropping tomorrow. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to go ahead and drop a like and subscribe and let me know how you guys felt about the first 5 volumes. But besides that, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you all in the next video.